Good morning, everybody. And like Jermaine, I mean, the welcome when you arrive at the school, the energy, the welcome by young people and the way it's set up, it's just a testament to you, Simon, and represents all the brilliant work done at this school. So it's great to be here and be back in Leeds. I'm sorry, that's the best photo I think they can do, and that's actually quite a good one. So they just get worse. I've got 20 minutes this morning, and what I intend to do and what I've said to Simon is I'd like to speak for about 10. But then I'd really like to have a sort of discussion where we have a bit of a Q&A if possible. So I'm pre-warning you now, and there's enough people in the room that I know that I could point to. So as I speak, I want challenge, really. I want to know what we could do better, how we could support schools and support those who work with young people, whether it's in schools, colleges, early years. It's great to have the full range and colleagues from the private and voluntary sector as well, because we're in this as a kind of shared national endeavour. Just to clear my role up, as the lead non-exec, I was appointed during the election, so I am a political appointment to that role unusually, and I'm also the Secretary of State Senior Advisor on Schools and School Standards. I'd like to begin, one of my heroes is someone called Viktor Frankl, who in the late 1950s wrote a book called The Mass Neurosis of Mankind. Not bad, actually. We need to think about humankind now, but the mass neurosis isn't a bad notion. And in there, he has this notion, the idea that what really pulls you in life are your values. The drivers are there around us, but what really pulls your values. And one of the things I want to get to in the 10 minutes is I want to share with you some of the values that are underpinning what we're trying to do at the Department for Education, and what I think people like the Secretary of State, and I'll be unashamed, I'm a fan of what she's trying to do with our education system. I'm not going to spend any time, well, I'll spend 1 minute on the legacy, because it gets dull, but we did inherit, and there was an inheritance of a system that had, at one level, not a broken system, but at certain levels, a whole load of problems for particular children, the most vulnerable children in our society. A whole load of issues that had to be sorted out. The two canaries in the mine for me were special educational needs, the number of children who just were finding school a place that wasn't giving them what they weren't responding to, wasn't meeting their needs, and the growth of special educational needs was a canary that we need to talk about in a minute. And the second canary is the number of children who just weren't coming to school or aren't coming to school. A doubling of absence since COVID. A tripling of suspensions from schools since COVID. There's a whole set of issues that were signalling that although for many children in England the system works, for too many it doesn't. And for the children it doesn't work well enough for, of course, are the children who are most vulnerable. The children who come from disadvantage, who face multiple disadvantages in their life, and children who have particular learning needs. So when you look at that picture, you say, how do you face it? Well, we came at it, or we are coming at it, with the notion of a mission. And the whole government is based on this notion of missions. And the big drivers in the mission for children, breaking the barriers to opportunity was the fundamental driver. But the four elements of the driver of the mission are, first of all, creating families that feel secure and safe. The first and most enduring educator of any child of their family. The sanctum of the love and care of families, nothing is more important than getting that right. So how do we support families to be safe and secure places? So I'll give you an example. I'm just going to got a couple of examples with each of the four themes because of time. A couple of months ago, we faced the question of, we actually found some money. And there isn't a lot available. That isn't something that, as a nation, we have an issue about the challenge we have. But we found some money. And you can make a decision with that money. It's £3 billion is the number. You could give that to school budgets, which would be a good thing to do. Or you can look at the poorest people in England, just about, and you can lift the two-child cap on poverty. You can lift the two-child cap and give families some more money and get children out of poverty. Where do you go? That's the issue about the values. There are trade-offs all the time when you're trying to make decisions about the limited resources we have. You arrive in the building and there's an envelope sitting on the table, which is the pay award for teachers, which hadn't been opened for 5 months, by the way, and wasn't in the budget line anywhere. And it says teachers, this is in 2024, should be given an extra pay award. We said, absolutely, we're going to find that money and we're going to make that happen. So by the end of next year, all being well, if the SDRB follow the advice that we're giving, in those 3 years, teachers' pay would have gone up 17%. There's a trade-off to make those decisions. So lifting families out of poverty, supporting schools, all the time there are trade-offs and they're underpinned by your kind of values and what you do. We are unashamed that we think you need to do both things at once. You need to lift families out of poverty and you need to support schools and resource schools the best you can. And so families, security, investing in, we've got more social workers than we've had since 2010 in our system now. We're trying to fund as many families get out of poverty, lifting children who are on universal credit, free school meals. These are all decisions which are about attending. And the biggest one, of course, I think in all of that is to the next theme, best start in life. So family secure, best start in life. The best start in life is built on the evidence, which many of you will know in this room. That is, if you want to support children to learn, if you want to thrive, get in early and invest in early years. I started teaching, 42 years ago in East London, and the idea that we would give families 30 hours of learning and care for every child, freely available, is a revolution, is a transformation. So we now have a system where 30 hours from 9 months old to 4 years old is available for families, free, provided by the state for working families. That is one of our best bets for the future. That's an £8 billion investment over the full of this Parliament, but a great investment. And we're seeing that's happening. We've got more nurseries, we've got more early years, we've got more children attending and meeting more needs. The challenge there for the early years colleagues, of course, is access is one thing, quality is another. How do we now make that the best quality possible? Best start in life, investing in that. The second bit after best start in life, and there's lots of other bits, I'm not going to list them all, is the business of schools. Right at the heart of the matter is schools. Fundamental institutions, the lives of people. Now, we've got a system, we were just talking about it in the refreshment area, we've got a system that says, essentially, you can create a school on a huge kind of range. Is it fair for me to name schools? Oh, no, I won't name them. But you've got schools like Carr Manor that have a philosophy and culture and deliver a kind of lives for children. And you've got other schools that do it in another way, a slightly less kind of humane way, but they do it another way. They are legal in our system. They are available. England creates enormous space for heads and leaders and communities to make decisions about the culture you build. Now, we're not in the business of saying, we know, we have the ideology, you will all do it just like that. We're in the business of saying to schools, in that framework, how do you make the really big decision of the culture of the place you want children to be and adults to work? We have guardrails. We have guardrails through accountability through inspection. We have guardrails through the way schools should be accountable to the communities they serve. We have guardrails around the outcomes we expect for children, and we attend to those. But unlike most systems in the world, there is huge space. So there's stuff the government does, but there's stuff we look back to the system and say, what are you doing? What culture are you creating? And how are you doing it? That's for schools to decide. We actually believe the improvement and growth of the system, I'm going to come to the end in a minute, is not driven from the top. It was mentioned that I used to be the national director for the primary strategies. We had armies of consultants. We marched out, we marched in. We had all you people, some people in the room might remember, that isn't the way of the world anymore. All the resources, most are in the schools. And the way we will improve, we believe, is by a kind of inside-out model. You unleash the kind of capacity in the system. The great thing about today, and why I love being at these events, is this is an example of where together we're learning together and from each and with each other. So the whole RISE model, universal RISE model this is saying that we believe the capacity to improve in the English education sits in the system. And if you want to learn and develop and grow, you will learn best from others like you who are doing the work in your community, in other schools. Equally, we all have a responsibility to share what we do with others. So when we changed the Ofsted framework and got rid of the headline judgment, one of the big wins in the new accountability framework is that you can't be exceptional unless you're doing something to help another institution improve. That's an incentive, an obligation to support others. And I really believe that that's where the capacity, in every piece of policy, there is a reference point in England where it's done brilliantly. We don't need to fly on planes to Singapore or Shanghai. We need to get on trains and go to places around this country and learn from each other. And if we did that, and we did that effectively, I won't do the stats, our whole system would just jump enormously if we were all doing as well as schools like us, the best schools like us. So we're really interested in schools like us, families of school, context, how do we learn from each other in a meaningful way? And then the final piece, and on that, I should say that we were categorical that the system will be measured by how well children achieve and thrive. And in the white paper coming forward, we've got these, we have got white papers that will be coming towards the end of the month on special educational needs and on the schools white paper. The whole agenda there is about the experience of schools and how do we create schools where children really believe they belong and thrive and achieve. And how do we roll that back and move that into that broader agenda of childhood? And the final piece, so you've got best start in life, you've got family security, best start in life, achieving and thriving. The final piece is often forgotten but fundamental to the future of this nation and to the future of the young people I'm talking about, is how do you give everyone the opportunity to really succeed in the workplace and to have the skills to be successful and to have options in their lives? So the work we've done on it, we've grown an enormous number of apprenticeships. We've really focused not on the A-level group. We think Route 1 is fine for those children broadly, except for the horrible thing that happens when you have to borrow the money or loans for university. We're focused on that other third, the young people who are too often leaving schools. We've got 1 million young people not in education, employment or training. If you're not in employment, education or training, what are you doing? The youth guarantee is the idea that we will say to every young person, we will guarantee that you have a place in training or work. And we're not leaving it to you. We are taking responsibility for that. And the work we're doing on apprenticeships, on V-levels, on particularly with the unsung heroes of FE colleges. And sometimes you want to go and see brilliant practice, go to some FE colleges. They are astonishing what's going on in some FE colleges in my book. Support young people who we need to get in the workplace. Because the only growth that will come in this country, and that's what we need if we're going to get more money for education, is growth, will come because we unleash the capacity and potential of those young people into work and in lives of opportunity and choice. So those bits hang together. The idea that we're trying to get this thread across. And we had a meeting a few weeks ago of all the ministers, and we were asked what we're proud of in the first 18 months. I'm proud of the fact that we've re-established this narrative of childhood. We look through the lives of children rather than just picking out one bit and honing on that. It does mean it's complicated. It does mean it's hard to summarize in 10 minutes. But we have to think about the lives of childhood through the line. Now, I could go on, I'm not going to, but we'll get into the conversations. Childhood is more challenging and more complex in my view than it's ever been. There are people fighting for the attention of our children. Sometimes forces of good and forces of not so good. So benign forces are trying to fight for our children's attention. We need to make schools, as we are doing, and places of learning, whether it's early years or colleges and schools, irresistible places where children want to be and they believe they belong. And that's the driving force of everything we're doing in the white paper. That's enough from me. Thank you very much. And now let's have some conversation just to see if that gets us going. Thank you, everybody. Right. We've got some microphones. So who would like to ask me a question or push back or challenge? And I'll go as far as I can on the questions, but we are being streamed, so that means I've got to be careful. Because I'd like to just let rip, to be honest with you. There's a hand here. Toby's hand's up. The academics, you see.
Always the academic. So,
yeah, got it. Next, we'll do that one up there. Toby.
So, thank you. Totally agree with you that there's always...
Thanks, Toby. No, sorry.
There's brilliant examples in the system of things being done really well. Leeds Learning Alliance is a really example of kind of place-based multi-agency partnership. How do you spread that? What's your model for moving that around? Because we know that didn't happen under the self-improving system approach. So yeah. How do you do that?
Yeah, I'll do two if that's all right, just so we get through as many as possible. Someone up there has got the microphone.
Hi, sorry. Again, I agree with what you said. Really interesting. Thank you for that. You talked about incentive at one point with schools being incentivized to work with other partners. I'm really concerned that current systems within systems like, for example, the Ofsted toolkit don't really incentivize inclusion, and still, like Progress 8 and other things, would encourage schools that don't have the same values as Carl Manor to not be as inclusive as they could be. And are there plans to actually properly incentivize inclusion?
So I'll do that one first and then come back down. Is that all right? So when you mention Progress 8, you're sort of guiding me towards the curriculum and the offer that we make to all young people. Is that, have I got the right theme? I'm looking at you. Okay, no. Oh, what do you know what? We can hear you just as well, so just go for it.
Yeah, because not obviously, but it's my opinion that you're more likely to get a high Progress 8 score the less vulnerable
Okay.
that you're working with.
Yeah.
Whereas if inclusion was incentivized, I think in the new Ofsted framework, inclusion is very internal. So you're looking at the SEND, the disadvantaged, etc., that are currently in the school.
Yeah.
But I think inclusion is actually an external thing as well. It's
Yeah.
about how you talk to parents on open evenings,
Okay.
about how you act at fair act.
I get it. I get it.
That isn't recognised at all, really, within the system.
I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. And there's the unseen and the seen in education, and we all know who have been in it and work in it, that there are schools in this country where someone would say to a parent, "I really would like to teach your child, but they'd be much better off down there. They really do it well down there." There are schools in our system who are excluded. You know, the majority of children excluded from school are children with special educational needs. There are schools in this country which don't represent the values that you're representing when you talk to me about inclusion from what you're saying. The question is, how do you create frameworks of accountability that change people's culture and values? It's really hard. So what you have to do is ask the question about my point about guardrails. You know, we have this open culture where we allow schools to exist on this huge spectrum. Is the suggestion, and is this actually make that tighter, bring it narrower? Admissions to me is a really interesting kind of dirty secret in education. Actually legislating for it is really difficult. So some of the answers are about what we do, and I'm being challenging to you now. Some of the answers are how we look each other in the eye as leaders and teachers, say, are we taking responsibility for the things that we should do? And that's not me passing the buck, it's me voicing the idea that building great systems is a collaborative endeavor. Government can do what it can do. Local partnerships shape culture massively, that you're doing here. Schools themselves, me in my classroom as a teacher. The ultimate issue for me here is that I have responsibility for the children in front of me. And I must take that responsibility. Nothing is more important. I worry, for example, that your point about Ofsted is people outsource responsibility to the accountability framework. In the end, it's about my personal values and my personal responsibility. So we will do what we can, and you need to keep challenging us. That bit of the toolkit isn't written correctly. We need we need to know how it needs to change to make that better. But we also need to look at each other and say collectively and collaboratively, are we doing the right things? And that isn't passing the buck, it's sharing the responsibility. And we're at that point, I think, where we need to have those sort of honest debates with each other. On the P8, as you see, we responded to the consultation from Becky Francis on CAR. We actually didn't agree with Becky. We actually want to go further and open up the buckets. You saw that in our response to the consultation. And you'll see us flush that out a bit more in the white paper. We think the curriculum offer needs to be more relevant and broader for more children. And that isn't dumbing down. I mean, the joke is, you see, that some people think, actually, Kevin, just narrow it, just push the EBAC down people's throats. For disadvantaged white working class children in England, the average outcome of the EBAC, the average grade, was 2.4. By the way, the average grade outcome for disadvantaged white working class kids, which is 18% of the population, by the way, is a 3. So this curriculum, this offer isn't working for 18% of the country. So we need to look at the curriculum, look at the offer, and ask, how do we open that up and give people the chance to study subjects and do things that really motivate them and engage them, and give them a chance to see a flight path to life and to work. If I had a penny for every time I walk into a class and a young person says to me, I don't know what's the point of this, because they can't see the link, and we need to sort of give them subjects and opportunities to study things that create the link. On the vehicle, how do you do it? I mean, mandating collaboration is quite hard, isn't it? It's like fighting for peace. It's a kind of weird concept. So we want to create structures that incentivize it. That's why we put that bit in the framework, that you can't get to that bit until you do that bit. That's why we're investing in the notion of this approach to RISE. Not the become targeted people want to later, but the universal model is each regional plan will be coming out, and it will be saying, here is the offer in your region. Here is it by schools like you. How do you navigate through that? How do you find? I'll give you one. I'm doing some work at the moment on the good levels of development at the end of reception. And we've identified a whole load of schools in different contexts, 90, who seem to be doing that in all sorts of interesting ways. And would you help other schools? Every school said yes. So what's interesting, when we ask the system, do you want to help others? We have no pushback. We're not funding them to do that. We're not funding the attendance and behavior hubs. When we asked for RISE advisors to come and help us, we were overwhelmed by people who wanted to come and support other schools. So I think the goodwill and the sense of shared endeavor is there. We need to unleash it. We need to unleash it. And you can want to be the best school in your area, but not do it at the expense of another school. We've got to say, I'm a great school. That's right. I want my school to be a great school. I wouldn't ever not want it to be. But I don't want that to be at the expense of another school. It's not counterintuitive. We've got some people who've found some answers and then are hoarding the opportunity to their children. They might be your pupils, but they're all our children. And how do we use that kind of notion, change our values in some places so you share and collaborate? There's so much we can do, but we do need to build on the lessons. You've done the research, Toby. You know it works. How do we make that happen in a kind of structured way without being heavy-handed? Because the minute we get heavy-handed, it'll stifle it. Let's keep going. Some more? Yes, this lady. There's a lady here, and there's a lady at the front. Well, you can have my mic. Why don't you go first?
Hi, thanks for your very kind comments about further education. My name's Andrea Cowans. I work for Luminate Education Group. We have Leeds City College, which is a big FE provider in the city. I've had the privilege over the last couple of years to be working closely on a secondment into Leeds City Council on a part-time basis, looking at our NEET issues in the city. And you picked that out as one of the big government concerns, talking about 1 million NEET young people. In Leeds, we're really at the sharp edge of NEET. We've had a stuck issue for the last few years. So it's really heartening to see initiatives being pushed forward around the youth guarantee and developing those principles of youth work in terms of how we work with an education workforce. My question really, though, is how the department is going to help us unpick some of those systemic barriers that we have as a country, and in particular as a city in Leeds, around space and capacity in post-16 education. So space, literally buildings, classrooms, teachers, chairs for our young people to work in. So the youth guarantee is laudable, and it's great to see that you're guaranteeing spaces in education, training and employment and apprenticeships for young people. But we're not quite sure where they're going to go because we just don't have the buildings in Leeds. And there's loads of other elements around the way further education funding works. For example, the fact that we pay VAT where schools and universities are not doing that, which disadvantages and doesn't help us build on the capacity when we're making those decisions about, do I employ a safeguarding officer or a teacher? Those decisions are happening on a granular basis in our institutions.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. Thanks. And there was one more. I keep doing this. I can't see anything. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm from FE as well. I'm from Notre Dame Sixth Form College in Leeds. My question was around, it was lovely to hear about all your philosophy around SEND disadvantaged. I was just wondering what you thought was the motivations to remove the BTEC, CTECs to replace them with an interim qualification for 2 years prior to the V level being introduced. Because I think, you know, the sector have tried to push back that it's not the right decision for our young people.
Yeah. So for colleagues who might not be in that sector, there are a set of qualifications been long-standing called the BTECs. And I think, is it fair for me to say there are a large number and they're of mixed quality? Am I allowed to say that? Yes. And there are varying BTECs. Some are incredibly effective in their relationship between the qualification and work. Others have kind of drifted slightly, should I say. So one of the questions about qualifications and pathways into work is that in England, unlike, say, countries that might do this pretty well, like Austria or Germany or somewhere, we have a proliferation of qualifications, and it's actually easier to map the path from being where you are to be a solicitor than it is to being a kind of heating engineer in terms of the different pathways. So we're trying to rationalize that, and that of course is the whole logic of things like the T levels, linking it to industry, linking it to work. But then the decision was made to make those at A-level equivalent. So then, okay, that's all right for those, but what about the ones below that? So then you've got this group of children, the young people, I should say, sorry, who are the most at need, and these qualifications are too far away. So we wanted to create pathways into T levels, foundations, and now there's got this notion of V levels. And as you go to that transition, you're dealing with the legacy of BTECs, and there's a discussion around which you fund, which you defund, and all that. And that is a live debate, and that is a live debate going on right now with Jackie Smith, our minister, and through the bill. So I hear what you're saying. I hear it often, and it's a well-made point, and we're trying to clarify where we stand. We're very, the value here is we're not ideological, we're pragmatic about these sort of things. So when people say you U-turn, that's us just listening to the evidence and making a different decision based on it, or listening hard. If you're ideological, you never U-turn. You just stick with your guns. Whereas, so I'm just going to move on because I do want to say something else about, but I will come back to that. FE, I know it seems like we've had quite a bit on it, and why shouldn't we? Because often it's the Cinderella bit of our system. FE has been underfunded, on average, of course. An FE teacher is about £8,000 less in their salary than a school teacher, teaching the same, you know, in the same sort of obligations. We are desperately trying to it will take time to build a funding in FE. There's a legacy and a history of underfunding it. And yet, of course, what's interesting about it is that these are the young people that in some ways are the harder to teach. People love keeping the A-level kids back. We have these random moments when we move the threshold at what grades we'll have for doing A-levels this year. But when it comes to these children who we found it harder to teach, harder to learn, we actually then don't give those educators the same amount of resources and support, and we're aware of that, and we're desperately trying to build that up. Capital is actually easier, buildings, actually, to be honest with you, for us, than revenue, and increasing. I was really disappointed that we couldn't win the argument, actually, around getting the FE salary pay award alongside, but it is something that everybody's working on. You saw the white paper on skills with pushing that. I just want to say one thing with time. Can I just say something about inclusion? Yeah, 1 minute. One of the biggest issues in education right now is how we face this legacy of what I would call a broken SEND system. We have seen an absolute proliferation in terms of the number of children now identified. Historically, we had about 2.5% of children on an ECHP plan or a special plan. This year, we're heading for 5%, and we're heading beyond. And this is driving. It's not the money that's the issue actually. It's the outcomes. It's the offer. Because when people are entering into that world, it would be great if what they were getting in there was then a well-evidenced, well-organized offer that met their needs. But often they go through an adversarial process, fight for a plan, and then have a plan that says actually very little about what you really need to do to help this child learn. The evidence of that is, of course, the outcomes are worse than they used to be for that group of children, and no one actually gets better. The plan, 98% of children never have a plan removed. They just stick with it for the rest of their outcome. So we are really desperately trying to focus on inclusion. How do we improve this system? We're not trying to cut the money. We're not trying to save things. We're trying to improve the outcomes. And we think the answer lies in investing in the main school system to support a broader range of children's needs. Equipping teachers, building capital program, building, as we know, we want to see resource bases. We want to see schools invest in a fluid relationship. Some children are in class sometime, they're in a centre when they need to be. Specialists at hand, you haven't got to go through a process. They're available, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, they're available when the school needs them, not after some awful adversarial process. And just remember that 80% of the growth in ECHPs has been awarded to families who've had to pay some money to get the plan. So what does that mean about which communities this is going to and which communities it's not going to? So it's about fairness, it's about doing it early, it's about doing it better. So that is going to be our shared endeavour for the next couple of years at least. It's going to be probably a decade. How do we create an inclusive system for all children to achieve and thrive? Thanks very much.